right, so today is going to be interactive, and I know that's everyone's worst fear on a Sunday morning. But if you haven't got in your hands a sheet of paper and a pen, please pop your hands up and the ushers will sort you out. Everybody who is earning or spending money should have a sheet. Even if you're a couple and one part of the couple does the finances, both adults should have their own sheet. Keep your hands up, the ushers will sort you out. Amen. So when Pastor Taylor knew he was going to be off in Australia, he asked me originally back in March, because obviously the Perth conference got pushed back. He asked me to put together a short series on the basics of handling personal finances. And this is a great opportunity over here, Luke as well, the Team Galt. Our hands are getting tired. This is a perfect opportunity because finances is something we don't like talking about, and it's very, very difficult to go up to somebody and say, look, I need some help with sorting out my personal finances. Because you expose to that person all manner of personal detritus it's quite un-British to do. It's very hard to do. Whereas in this group setting, nobody needs to feel foolish because we're all going to cover some basic stuff together. And if you've got all your personal finances tickety-boo, no problem, because at least you maybe have some tools to use when people do come to you for help. So we've got a 3-week series. This first week, we are looking at building a budget. The second week, next week, we're looking at destroying debt. And week 3, financing the future. And I should say, just because I'm the person speaking doesn't mean I've got all my financial life sorted out. But so I'm sure there are many people who will be here with a far better grip on their finances than I have on mine. So I will take it as a compliment that you'll be kind to me and listen to the small pearls of wisdom that I may or may not have. Okay, let's give out a few scriptures, if I may. I've only got a few, but if I could get a few volunteers. Anna Maria, could you get Genesis 41, 47 to 49? Genesis 41, 47 to 49. Terry, if you could get Philippians 4, 19. Linda, Matthew 6, 34. Another volunteer. Kent, Matthew 5, 42. And Aidan, if you could get Genesis 41, 4. Actually, that's the same text as... Yeah, that's the same text as Amy, so we'll just come back to you, Amy, a little bit later on. So you got out there, Aidan. All righty, that's it on the scripture front. So this short series I've called Money Matters. And money matters in different ways. Matters is a verb, meaning be important or significant. Even though we're Christians and it's mammon, if we don't have a grip on our personal finances, it will be something that causes ramifications in all areas of our life. Personal finance management allows us to be liberal. It allows us to not have a weight and a burden over our daily lives. And it's something we need to manage, even though it is mammon. It's still the right thing to do, to be attentive to our finances. So let's start off with the idea of a budget. Budgets are not things that people get excited about, right? It has a similar connotation to a diet. If you say, I'm dieting, you don't mean I'm living a normal balanced diet and I'm not particularly worried about my weight. No, if you say I'm dieting, what you're basically saying is I need to lose weight, I'm trying to lose weight. It's the same with budget. You don't say, oh, I'm budgeting, I'm doing my budget, that's out of budget. That's normally saying I'm short of money, isn't it? That's how we see it. We don't see it as a good thing. we don't sort of use it as a term where you expect a millionaire driving his Ferrari to say, I'm budgeting at the moment. But actually that should be the case. Budget just means an estimate of income and expenditure for a set period of time. And so the first thing we need to do is just make sure that when we're talking about a budget, we don't see it as a negative restraint, but just a part of good stewardship that we should be doing. So let's have Amy, a biblical account of somebody keeping a budget in Genesis 41, 47 to 49.
Now in the 7th plentiful years, the ground brought forth abundantly. So he gathered up all the food of the 7 years which were in the land of Egypt, and laid up the food in the cities. He laid up in every city the food of the fields which surrounded them. Joseph gathered very much grain, as the sand of the sea, until he stopped counting, for it was immeasurable.
Joseph gathered very much grain, as the sand of the sea, until he stopped counting, for it was immeasurable. So here we can see Joseph as the chief minister, and the point where he stops counting is when he physically can't, because there's so much grain, it's immeasurable. Well, in our context, that probably means you need to have the sort of financial income of someone like Bill Gates. So much money, it's hard to quantify. But for all us mere mortals, that probably means we always should be accounting for our finances. So when, I'm sure almost everybody here has at some point created, established, set a budget. Why is it so hard to stick to a budget? Ken.
It keeps work to keep up to date. You have to keep it's work to keep it up to date, and then you might forget about it a few days or a few months, and then you slipped into old habits.
Yeah, it takes effort, doesn't it? Okay, Kerry.
Maybe because we haven't got any savings and we have unexpected bills rise up, and then you have to...
So you've got a budget, but then something out of the blue turns up that you have to deal with. Yeah, okay. Terry?
Because we lack self-discipline.
Because we lack self-discipline. You have to be disciplined to stay within a budget, don't you? Sean?
The hardest thing is you're fighting against spiritual powers, because it's the only thing that's measured up to God that other people serve. And so it's a very, basically. Do you get what I mean?
No. Say it again.
So, because it talks about mammon and God and mammon, and it's the only thing that can actually become a God in our lives. And so that's why it's so difficult to fight.
Yeah, okay, we'll come back to Sean's idea. So let's see any more practical reasons why you've had a budget in the past and you've broken through it. Tegan?
Well, if you go shopping, then you may find stuff or
it's £30 off, it will never be this cheap again.
and then you have to buy it because it's the only one left. And,
That's right, yeah. It happens, doesn't it? It's, look what a bargain. Mike, just here, down there.
I think it has to do with the fear of missing out on.
FOMO.
Okay.
Especially when it comes to spending on social activities. If everybody else is going to a thing, going to a restaurant, going to an event, you can't really afford it. You don't want to say, it's not in our budget, I can't afford it. So you end up overextending. Jordan?
If people aren't kind of disciplined and quick to track their outgoings, they might have then overspend their budget before they've actually checked how much they've got left.
So they do budgeting midway through the month, and they've already gone over the budget. It's okay. Kent, last one on this, and we'll move along.
And you also need to be good on math and count.
Do you though, Kent? You
So-
need to have some basic mathematical
basic
skills, but do you actually need to be good at maths to add up? I don't know. I think that's a cop-out. Okay, now to come back to what Sean was talking about, we've just had practical reasons why we don't stick to a budget. But what are the pseudo-Christian justifications we make? I'm saying pseudo because they're not real ones, but we spiritualize our poor money management, don't we? So we kind of had one from Sean, which was, I don't want to get involved with mammon. But Jordan, what's yours?
It's okay if I spend all this. God will provide and fix it anyway.
Yeah, that's right. So let me have a look here. Terry, if you could read your scripture, Philippians 4:19. That's sort of in that bank, isn't it?
And my God shall supply all your need according to his riches in glory by Christ Jesus.
Yeah, God is a provider, which is true. And so if I have a need, God will meet my need, which is also true. But he calls us to be a good steward, doesn't he? And that doesn't mean being wasteful of what God. Okay, what other pseudo-spiritual reasons? I think, was it John? Did you have your hand up? Or somebody around here? Was it you, Carol? Oh, that was your one. Okay, Aidan?
Oh, the devil keeps on attacking my finances.
The devil keeps on attacking I haven't actually got that one, but yes. Yeah, the devil keeps attacking. My car blew up. The devil will attack my phone. Unfortunately, the kids all got to the age where they needed the next step. And it's possibly true, because sometimes that is the case, isn't it? We do know that we get assaulted by the devil. But if it's every week, every month, some things to give there, whether it's dominion, whether it's our financial controls. But yeah, that's something that Christians say, isn't it? I remember when we opened the Stevenson Road 180, that's first Saturday, and there was, I think, 3 different people coming through, ripped their car tires, driving down the road. And everybody was saying, God, the devil's really assaulting us opening this. Maybe he was, right? I don't know. But what I do know is they were driving really quickly and didn't see the chevron-y bit sticking out on the road. So you could say our church has poor quality drivers, or you could say the devil's. I'm not the one to say which way it is, but we do over-spiritualize everything, don't we? Okay, any other Carol?
If I had more money, it would be okay.
If we had more money, things would be. I'm really tight. Yeah, and when things are tight, it is tougher, obviously, but. Yeah, okay, and so let's have Linda, your scripture, please, Linda. Matthew 6:34.
Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about its own things. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble.
Yeah, so the idea of, look, I've got the money now. This is my provision for now. Let's not worry about tomorrow. I've got another one, which I think hasn't come up, but Kent, can I have your scripture? Matthew 5:42, please.
Give to him who asks you, and from him who wants to borrow from you, do not turn away.
So it's this idea, isn't it, that as Christians we're called to be liberal to church, liberal to other folk. We want to be a blessing. We want to take people out for dinner. We want to have people around to our house. And that comes with a cost, doesn't it? And sometimes our excuse for blowing our budget is we don't want to not be liberal. We want to treat that pioneer pastor's coming, and we want to take them out, don't you know? And that's not evil, but that can be an excuse for why we blow our budget. Okay, so let's go back, Amy, if you're able, to your scripture, a different part of the story of Joseph. Genesis 41, 44 to 46, please.
Pharaoh also said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without your consent no man may lift his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Saphnath-Paneah, and he gave him as a wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. So Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt.
And so this is the story of how Joseph starts his ministry, as it were, as chief minister, what he does is he goes out through all the land of Egypt. He's got a new wife. But instead of spending time with his new wife, he goes out through all the land. And Egypt was huge. And he was going on a horse, right? You know, it's a huge place. He goes out and he surveys the land. In the New Living Translation, that verse is translated, and when Joseph left Pharaoh's presence, he inspected the entire land of Egypt. And that's got to be the starting point to us getting a grip on our finances, is what is the state of affairs, right? Whether you've got a little, you've got a lot, if you don't know what's coming in and what's going out, you can't make a budget that's realistic. You can't make a plan to get out of debt. You can't make a plan on how much you can afford to give, or how many people you can have around, or whether you can go on holiday. Otherwise, you just end up in a bigger mess. And so I've got a couple of examples, where inspecting the land is really important. I had a work colleague who I've known over the years, and their income has gone up exponentially over the years as they've built their professional career. And when I first met them many years ago, they had a low income, and at the end of every month, they were scratching around in their overdraft, asking to borrow money from people until payday. But they had a low income. Fast forwards, 10 years later, income much higher, much higher, but at the end of every month, they're scratching around in their overdraft and borrowing money. It's not necessarily an income piece, it's what you do with it. And so the idea of surveying where the money went is super important to get dominion and breakthrough, because it's not just putting more money in at the top. Another example, I was looking over somebody's bank statement a few years ago, and they were paying for 2 gym memberships and attending neither gym. I mean, it's very easy if you've got a bit of disposable income. It's easy to have direct debits and little bits of money come out of your account. You kind of know. And when you add that up, when you times it by 12, and you go, hang on, that's how much a year? That's £600, £700, £800 gone in a year. Well, it might not feel very much each month if you've got a bit of disposable income. But when you add it up over the year, that can be a huge amount of money. What would you do with £800? That's a serious chunk. But disappear, and there's a number of different things that come out when you actually deep dive into your finances. So that's what we're going to do now. So you should have, if you haven't, pop your hand up and the ushers will sort you out. You should have a piece of paper and a pen. Now, I would love for this to be an individual activity. So even if you're in a couple and one person, which is normally the way, sometimes the wife, sometimes the husband, normally takes ownership of the administration of finances. But for this, I'd like it if individually you complete this, because spending happens by 2 people, doesn't it, in a marriage? So even if one person looks after the finances, the other person's out spending money, making decisions every day as well. So if they've not got a grip of the finances, then it's very unlikely that a budget can be kept to. So pop your hand up if you haven't got one. Now, I'm not going to look at these sheets. They're purely for you. We're not going to share any numbers from them. This is purely for you, so don't worry about what you fill it out. But what I'd like us to do, without checking your banking app, without checking any of your emails, please can you complete your best estimate in the red column. If we could have on the screen the digital copy of this. So there's 2 pages. One side has got your income and fixed bills, and the other side's got your discretionary spending. Income is straightforward. I've put some suggested categories there. You might have other income categories. The red column, What do you think you received in income as a family or as an individual, however your family's set up, in May? I don't want the gross figure before tax, because in some ways that's irrelevant, especially if you're PAYE. I want what actually came into your bank account in May. What actually came into your bank account in May, to the best of your recollection, from benefits, if you've got universal credit, working tax credit, child benefit, any other regular income, any one-off income. This is not for me, by the way. I'm not going to see these. This is just for you to put in that column in red. And then fixed bills, which is the next bit down. So tithes, any pledges that you pre-commit to give, your rent, mortgage, all your utilities, council tax, everything you're paying each month, mobile phones, if you've got loans that you have to pay, or car leases or anything in there, insurance, all the rest. And then on the back, your discretionary spending. Now, I'm sure there's other categories, so I left a few blanks for you to put other categories in there, because I don't know what you'll get up to. But I put the categories I could think of. This is where, it's not a fixed commitment, groceries, clothes, everything you spend. So we'll give a few minutes and fill out the red column. And then if you could just sort of, give me a nod or something when you're done, then I get the sort of sense of how everybody's getting on. And we'll give it a few minutes. But the aim here is, and also people on sound desk, they should have them as well. We're over here. I don't want them shirking because they're not in the seats here. And a Tando, all of you at the back here, no lurking. Reuben hiding outside. He's got an income. Yeah. If you manage your finances as a couple, do it as a couple. But each of you do it separately, right? Because, for example, maybe Luke, you have a different idea of the family finances to Christy. And even if you're managing the finances, probably a good idea for Christy to know what the financial situation is. Okay, so, and you don't have to show anyone, and please just be, gracious of people's privacy, not to look at their numbers, because finances are very personal. So if you don't feel afraid to just spread out a bit, otherwise you won't get the value off it. Yeah, Harriet? So savings don't put them on here. If you've got, unless it's, savings are not part of this. This is income outgoing. Savings don't put on this. But good job for having savings, Harriet. Yeah.
So are we just filling in the red section, yeah?
You can only fill in the red section at the moment. And then just give me a little nod when you've gone through. I know it's a bit, but we're not in a rush. If you're on live stream, you can follow along. Have you filled your sheet out, Amos? How are we getting on, folks? Pop your hand up if you're still kind of going through it, if you're still working through it. Pop your hand up just so I can see if you're still working through it. Yeah. Feels like an exam, doesn't it? It's like sort of hushed silence that happens in an exam room. So we're just filling out the red column on that sheet as individuals. Who's still going? All right, we'll move along. So this is what I would like a commitment from you all for. When you go home, I want you to make a pledge now that you are going to go onto your online banking app or your bank statements or however you do it and fill out the green column. And for income, that's probably fairly easy. But for your expenditure, that does mean you're going to have to break out the calculator and add up all the different utility bills, all the different, all the different spending at the Tesco's or whatever. You're going to have to add up all those different lines. It's probably going to take a few minutes. But you will only get the value of this if you go home, no matter whether you think you're great on top of your finances or you know you're awful on your finances, you'll only get the benefit from this if you go home and you fill out the green column for May. Okay, Ken, did you have a question?
So that for us then would be from the 25th of previous month to the 25th of May?
Do it for May. Do it for the month of May. Calendar month.
1st of May to the last May.
Do it for the whole month, yeah. I mean, look, you could do it a different way. You could get a second sheet and do it from payday to payday, but do it for the it's nice and easy then, because you literally look in your banking app, and if it's got a date in May, it goes on the sheet. If it doesn't have a date in May, it doesn't go on the sheet. And so it will take you a few minutes because you're going to have to go through, and you probably have hundreds of lines. If you use your debit card, you've probably got hundreds of. If you've got several bank accounts, you should do it as well. If you spend on credit cards, that's spending, that should come into the spending. And so go through, and you have to ask yourself as an individual, as a couple, how different the red and green lines are, right? If your red column and your green are basically the same, out by a couple of pounds, a few pounds, then okay, you can say to yourself, I've got a good grip on knowing what's going on in my finances. You might be mismanaging them. You might not be spending on the right things, but at least you know what's going on, right? At least you know. Whereas if they're out, either over or under, by a significant way, then you have to do some self-reflection that you don't know what's going on in your personal finances. Yeah, so I think income should be easier, but maybe not. If you're self-employed, you might think you're earning less than you are. But the outgoings, how much are you actually spending on groceries, on petrol, on different things? If you're out by a significant way, that's really your wake-up call that you don't know what's going on in your finances. So that's your homework, but it's only going to work if you go home and do it, okay? All right. So that, having done that, that should be the backdrop for you then being able to set a realistic working budget, okay? And the urgency that you need to set a budget is going to depend on, the outcome of you doing that audit. So what is the golden rule for personal finances? The number one golden rule. Oh, over to Mr. Kant, please.
Income £100, outgoings £99, bliss. Income £100, outgoing £101, misery.
Okay, can I have that slide with the green, orange, and red on, please, Emma? So this is my phrasing of the same thing. So if your outgoings are less than your income, right, i.e. you don't spend everything you earn, there's a bit left over each month, whether you put it in a savings account or it's in your current, there's a bit left over, that's the golden rule. If you are, and you're in green territory then, the bigger the gap between your income and your outgoings, the larger your income is compared to your outgoings, the bigger your safety net and the opportunity you have to be liberated from frustration with finances. If your outgoings are the same as your income, you're in the danger zone, because one thing that goes wrong pushes you under. Yeah, one thing, the car has a particularly expensive service. Yeah, the tax rate goes up a little bit, like it just did. National insurance went up by a percentage point, right? And suddenly your take-home pay is that little bit less. Energy bills go up that chunk that we've seen. And so it doesn't take much to knock you out of equilibrium. And that's the danger zone, is when your outgoings equal your income. And the real red zone, which is not sustainable, is outgoings being larger than income. Because that means you're getting into debt. You may be eating into savings. Haven't got savings, you're going into debt. Okay. And the bigger that gap, the worse and quicker that's going to become a problem in your life. So there's a book written by a bloke called Scott Paper. It's slightly ironic that he wrote a book, but Scott Paper wrote a book called Barefoot Investor. He's an Australian, and he says in that book, if you really want to win, you should ditch tracking everything and instead simplify your choices. So we talked a bit about why we don't stick in the practical sense to a budget. And there's lots of different methodology you can use to make a budget. And if yours is working, and the proof of that is when you do your audit sheet, you know what was going in, you know what's going out, and you are making more than you're spending, well, then your method's probably working fine for you. But the number one reason that this bloke thinks that people fail to stick the course with a budget is because they make it too complicated or too aggressive with too little wiggle room. They say, I'm only going to spend £10 a month on a very specific thing and 56 categories. And it's too complicated in the real world when you're milling about to decide those sort of things. So he's got a system which I have adapted. He's Australian, things are a little bit different, and I think his system is a bit too complicated. So I've taken the thrust of his system and adapted it. And these are some of the things I've helped a number of people with over the years, maybe not quite so codified as this. But this isn't the only way. So I'm not saying this is the only way. I'm not saying that there's not better systems. And everyone's different. They all approach things differently, right? It's like a diet. There are hundreds of diets. But this is a good system which, if you haven't got a budget, if you're struggling with finances, is a good way to start. Can I have that next slide up, please, Emma? So this diagram, which I've adapted, is from this Barefoot Investor book. And this is basically how he represents your finances. There's income coming in the top of a leaky bucket. Water or your finances just dripping out. And I think the best thing to do, without being too complicated, is to split your finances into 4 different pots. The purple pot there is your discretionary spending. You're spending money that you go out and you spend at will. And that might be for things you have to spend money on, like food, clothes sometimes, but it's also you're spending on luxuries and eating out and takeaways and anything else you routinely spend money on. But then to have a longer term savings pot as well, and that is going to be for different things depending on you and your situation and stage in life. It might be for a house, a big thing you're saving for years. It might be for a car, a big thing you're saving for years. It might be for a holiday. You might be saving it might be for Christmas. But a longer term savings pot. He calls this the smile pot because it should be for things that make you smile. Yeah? It should be for holidays or a car, a house, or something that's a big commitment, but it should make you smile when you achieve that goal. And then he's got another savings pot, which he calls the fire extinguisher pot. And this is for those unexpected, but come on, they were expected, routine crises. The washing machine's blown up. The car's got a more expensive service this year. There's a little gap in employment, and I've got to cover wages for a couple of weeks. I got a speeding ticket, They're not things you're budgeting for. And this is normally, I think maybe Debbie or someone in this corner, Kerry maybe said this. That's one of the big reasons that we fall out of favor with a budget. We don't account for those sort of things. And because maybe we're running on a tight budget, we haven't got spare money. But if you don't account for those predictable things, there's always, who knows which one it'll be, but there'll always be one of those popping up. And so it's about making a plan to save for those short-term savings, the fire extinguisher savings. And then the red bucket there is your fixed bills. So I've come up with a suggested list: tithe, rent, mortgage, utilities, council tax, mobile phones, any loan repayments, car repayments, any fixed contractual obligation. Anything where you're going to start getting court summons if you don't pay it. That's a fixed commitment. Anything that you're pre-committed to, probably your direct debits and standing orders are all in that. Okay, and so 4 categories rather than 94 categories. Okay, let's have the next slide, please, Emma. But this is the important piece. Another reason why people struggle with budgets is they do a paper budget, all worked out, but all the money goes into the same place. So your paper budget says one thing, but then as you're whizzing around, living your life, spending on your debit card or withdrawing money, it's very easy for you to overspill one category into another category because all coming from the same place. So those 4 pots of money, they have to go to different places. And the number one thing that I tell people, and they never really seem to do, but the number one thing I always say to people is calculate your fixed bills and create another current account, a separate current account where you can put all your direct debits from that current account. And then when you get paid, move all your fixed bills into that current account. Don't carry that debit card with you. Put it in a drawer. Don't use it. That's not spending money. That's not money you access. And the pressure it relieves from you, especially if you're on a tight budget, to know that it doesn't matter whether you've got a bill coming out on the 1st, the 2nd, the 10th, or the 29th of the month, that the money is there for that direct debit. That the relief that gives you is huge. Because, bills come out at different times, don't they? And we can try and organize them to come out the 1st of the month. But inevitably, you signed a mobile phone contract on the 15th. It comes out. There's nothing worse than thinking you had money, overindulging at the start of the month, and then, that fixed bill I forgot about is coming out on the 20th. So having a separate current account for your fixed bills, and then when you get paid, moving every pound you need for the fixed bills there, and then forgetting about it, just takes a big pressure off. Don't carry those debit cards. Don't move money out of that account through your banking app. Put the debit cards in the bin or in the drawer or something. That's purely a place you set up for your fixed outgoings. Then you have a savings account in blue for your fire extinguisher money. So this is the money you're putting aside every month or however often you get paid for the routine, predictable crisis. The thing that always happens, the routine, predictable crisis, but which one you don't know. And that money you have to expect you'll go in, and at some point over the few months it'll come out. It'll go in, and for a few months it'll build up, then you have the MOT. It goes in, a few months tick by, you get that speeding ticket. And then you move the money out and you use it to pay for that. But then this is the next key, is your SMILE or longer term savings. Have an account at a different financial institution. Yeah, a different financial institution. A different bank. It could be an ISA, it could be something else, premium bonds or whatever, but put it somewhere where it's that much harder to move. Of course, you can have the app and it takes 5 minutes to move, but there is a difference psychologically when you have to go from your main banking app to your other bank to move money over. It's just a psychological bigger hurdle. So when it gets to the 26th of the month, you're overspent. It's that bit of a hurdle to just move some money from those savings over to cover it. And then your main current account has what's left. That's the spending money. And that's the one with the debit card where you're whizzing around buying stuff. So 4 accounts, really only 2 that you're using on any sort of frequent basis. That's how it's structured. And that physical separation is probably a more digital manifestation of the old envelope system with cash, right? But, we don't carry bundles of cash around. It's a pain in the neck. So this is maybe a digital version of that. Can I have the next slide, please, Emma? So this is how now you sort of need to work out for you and your budget what goes into each pot. Yeah. Actually, let's just have the next slide because I've kind of covered that as we go. So the fixed bills is the easiest bit. Once you've done this sheet, you should know what your fixed bills were for May. And probably most people's fixed bills are the same most months, but maybe not. You need to work out what your fixed bills are. And I just made a random example. Maybe there's a tithe, a pledge, rent, mobile, utilities. There might be, depending on your circumstances, you might have loan repayments or car payments or all manner of gym memberships, other fixed outgoings. So whatever your fixed bills are, you total that up and you get to a number. In this just made up example, it's £945. Next slide, please, Emma. So you stick that in, that's your fixed bills. So every month when you get paid, this person, let's call them Sandra needs to move £945 into their fixed bill account. And that doesn't get touched. All the direct debits and standing orders will just reduce it over the month. Okay, next slide. So let's say this made-up person has an income of $1,450. That's about the take-home pay of someone working 40, 45 hours on the national living wage, if they're an adult, I think 25 or over. But you need to put your own number in. So this is your total income that hits your bank account. If it goes to HMRC, it's not really yours, is it? And so, what hits your bank account, including any benefits you receive, working tax credit, child benefits, universal credit, if you've got top-ups of it, if you've got other income from babysitting or through whatever gifts that come through, any income goes in that top bucket. That's the money coming in. So that should be easy enough to calculate as well. And then the next one. So here, Sandra has got an income of $1,450, fixed bills of $945. So the discretionary spending that she's got, the pot of money that's actually hers to do stuff with, is $505. And this is an important milestone to understand, because if you really aren't great with finances, you get paid, £1,450 hits your bank account. It is so psychologically easy when you look at the banking app to feel like you've got £1,450. But you haven't. You've pre-committed, I didn't update that number, but you pre-committed your fixed bills, in this case, $945, right? You've got that pre-committed because of your loan repayments, your rent. It's not even yours. So get rid of that psychological trick. Move that money into a different account. She's actually got $505. And I know that sounds like a lot less, but that's £505 for them to do what they like with without having to worry that the basic requirements of life, your rent, electricity, are being paid. So you work that out. Next slide, please, Emma. And so then you have to decide what percentage split needs to go to these 3 categories. Spending money, which is the money you're going to spend in the month on everything from luxuries to essentials. Smile, which is your long-term, big picture stuff. Fire extinguisher, which is your short-term emergency spending for those routine emergencies. Now, I've worked with a few different people over the years, and 60-20-20 actually seems about right. it doesn't leave you, in this example here, for Sandra, doesn't leave heaps of money. If you send £101, 20% to that Smile account, 20% to that fire extinguisher account, it only leaves you £303 to spend. But that's genuinely yours to spend then. And of course you have to buy food and fuel, but it's genuinely, if you spend it all in the first week, then you're eating nothing for the next 3 weeks. But at least your house and roof and everything's taken care of, and at least you've got a pot of money growing for the routine emergency, that fire extinguisher fund. Because £101 after 2 months, after 3 months, after 4 months, that will pay for the MOT and the service. But it's painful. You have to put it aside. Of course you do. Now, this example is not on a high income. If you're obviously earning more money, and if you've got 2 people, dual incomes, no kids, then that's obviously higher amounts of money. But 60, 20, 20 is a good starting point. But you need to work that through. If you're literally, not meeting your fixed bills, then it's a different story to if there's a little bit of capacity. But what you do is when payday comes, you move your fixed bills to that account, you move your Smile money to that account, your fire extinguisher money to that account, and then what's left is yours to do what you like with. And of course, if you're couples, you might then do something, differently, take some cash out for each of you to spend or whatever, but or just use it from your current account. But that's the basic idea. So did we have any questions, comments, anything anyone wants clarity on? Toya Green.
So I have a LISA, and I put a lump sum of money into it, like when I get paid. And then it has the option where it takes so it rounds up the amount of money that I take out of my current account, and then that roundup of money then goes into the LISA. What do you think of those strategies?
So that really, your LISA is your Smile account in this setup, right? It's a long term, it's obviously for a house, and so that's that Smile account. That's absolutely great. And for you, living, in a flat share, no kids and everything, maybe your proportions, when you look at it, you can maybe have 40% of your, discretionary spend go into your Smile account. Those numbers have got to be relative to your income and your situation. If you've got loads of spare cash, you should be saving more for a longer term. But in 2 weeks' time, we're going to be looking at financing the future. And so we'd cover a little bit more of that then. Sean.
I think it's a really good point on making it simple as possible, because I think in the past I've probably made it more complicated than it needed to be. Thought I was doing the right thing and it didn't actually work.
Yeah, this is the key, right? If you do this or something similar, you have in your current account, after you've been paid and you've moved your money around, that money is yours to do what you like. And you look at the number, and it's a lower number than you're used to seeing. Because normally at the start of the month, you're used to seeing quite a high number, and it's a much lower. But if that money all goes, sure, you'll be eating rice and pasta for the rest of the month, and you might be scrabbling around for loose change for the fuel, but your basic costs of living are met. Every bill that's coming, even if it's in 3 weeks' time, 4 weeks, and if there's a crisis, you've got a little pot of money put aside for it. So it does make it easier. When you look at the banking app, you go, oh, I have actually got that to spend. We can afford this, versus having to do the mental juggle of how much is left for the rent that's due in 2 weeks. Dodie.
I was just going to say something that really helped me, and very similar to this, is actually categorizing your spend. When I moved out, I decided to import everything into a spreadsheet, categorize everything, and it's very easy to just look at £5, £10, £5, £10, especially for eating out. But when you actually put them all together, 1 month, the bill on eating out was more than my fuel. And I'm thinking, how did that happen?
Well, that's what this should really show you, because I suspect some people here will be on it, right? Will be on it with their fund. They'll know exactly what's going where. But I would think that for a lot of people, you'll do this exercise and you'll go, how much did I spend on? Insert the category for you. Did I really spend that amount of money last month in May on this? And it's not so distant that you can't remember it. You know, like, did I really spend that much money on takeaways, Deliveroo, Just Eat, Sainsbury's, Tesco's, and whatever it is, I don't know, but I'm sure there'll be some shocks, and that's what this is about. Next week, we're going to look a little bit more at actually how you can reduce your spending and be sensible with what you've got coming in. But this week, it's more about let's do that inspection of the land, like Joseph, right? Let's do the inspection of the land, make a sensible kind of budget, and then hopefully if you all keep your pledge to fill out that green column, next week we might have some testimonies as we get going into debt busting next week. We might have some testimonies. You don't have to tell us the amount. These finances are private, but you might be able to say, I couldn't believe how much I was spending on, insert the thing here, insert the name here. Toya?
I was just going to say as well, something that kind of scared me a little bit is when I first started my new job, I had to give them bank statements to show my proof of address. And so when I printed those out, I was looking at them and I was like horrified because it's like McDonald's and like things like this. And so sometimes rather than looking at your transaction listing on your bank account, because you can just quickly skim through that, but when you actually see the paper version, you can actually see like the payments in.
Yeah.
And that's kind of.
So people work differently. I mean, it depends on which bank you're with, how good the app is, and how. But you can always request for free with a current account. You can always request for free a printed copy every month of your statement. You can also print them out, as well if you want to go home and do it. A lot of banking apps are really good, though, and you can just whiz through, write it down on a sheet of paper. But there is something about a physical bank statement where you cross out the lines and you go, how much did I spend on insert name of vice? Can I really have spent that much on whatever it is? Ken?
Yeah, so I guess if you want to be charitable, help someone out, or if you want to do some impulsive buy and everything, that will be in the green column. So at the beginning of the month, you know how much money you have there for doing a bit of that extra, I guess.
If Emma, if you could put up that last slide for me. Again, if you've still got it. If you maybe go back to the last one where the color blocks were on. I can't remember what slide it was, but where it had this one. So what's in the purple there is for you to spend on whatever you want. Now, you probably should prioritize your basic food and fuel, but if there's if your budget there leads a larger number, if your income is such, that where you've got, some people might have £1,000, £2,000 in that spending money camp, right, each month, depending on income levels. But that's the money for you to then go and do stuff with. But if you, at the start of the month, go and you spend it all on clothes, you're going to have less nutritious meals later in the month, right? And but that's the money that you've got to spread over the month. Or I'm saying month here. If you're paid weekly or bi-weekly, you need to work with that. If you're self-employed, there's a whole extra discipline because you need to be saving money each month for tax, and a rule of thumb is probably about a third. Will give you, no problems at the end of the year, but you need to be saving money for tax as well. So if you're self-employed, you probably need an extra category. A third of your total income probably needs to be put aside just to make sure you're not going to have issues for tax man, but that's a different kettle of fish. Okay, lovely job. So next week we're looking at debt busting, and we're going to talk about, hopefully you will have all kept your pledge and have done this today. We're going to talk next week about debt busting. If you're in debt, sensible way to start thinking about getting out of debt. How you can be sensible with some financial spending commitments and some sort of common areas where people seem to go wrong. Then the week after, we're looking at financing the future. And so in that one, we're talking about myths about credit scores. Lots of credit ratings, a lot of Americanization myths about what that means in the UK. We're going to be talking about some sensible investments with a biblical picture and some unwise investments as well. And so that's in week 3. Amen. Let's have, perhaps Sean, you could close off in a word of prayer as we have a couple of minutes before service.